It was a Thursday in April, and Nero Wolfe was in a mood that could charitably be described as tolerant. This was remarkable because tolerance was not among his natural states, which generally ranged from mild irritation to volcanic disapproval of the human race and its myriad follies. But it was 10 minutes past 9 in the evening. The orchids had been properly admired in their fourth-floor kingdom. Fritz Brenner had outdone himself with a lamb curry that had made even Wolfe grunt approval, and he was now settled in his oversized chair behind his desk in the office, working through his second bottle of beer with the precision of a man for whom even pleasure must follow a schedule. I was at my desk near the door, pretending to update the germination records while actually reading the sports page and wondering if the Yankees would ever learn to hit a curveball. The brownstone on West 35th Street was wrapped in its usual evening calm. It's the kind that comes when a man weighs 1/7 of a ton, refuses to leave his home for any reason short of fire or revolution, and has arranged his world so perfectly that nothing unexpected is permitted to intrude. That's when the doorbell rang. I glanced at my wristwatch. 9:23. Wolfe's eyes, which had been half closed in contentment, opened to full wit twitch for him, meant approximately normal, human size, and fixed on me with the expression of a man who has just been informed that his tailor has retired. "No," he said, "I haven't answered it yet." "Don't." The doorbell rang again, longer this time. With the Anute was a Thursday in April, and Nero Wolfe was in a mood that could charitably be described as tolerant. This was remarkable because tolerance was not among his natural states, which generally ranged from mild irritation to volcanic disapproval of the human race and its myriad follies. But it was 10 minutes past 9 in the evening. The orchids had been properly admired in their fourth-floor kingdom. Fritz Brenner had outdone himself with a lamb curry that had made even Wolfe grunt approval, and he was now settled in his oversized chair behind his desk in the office, working through his second bottle of beer with the precision of a man for whom even pleasure must follow a schedule. I was at my desk near the door, pretending to update the germination records, while actually reading the sports page and wondering if the Yankees would ever learn to hit a curveball. The brownstone on West 35th Street was wrapped in its usual evening calm. It's the kind that comes when a man weighs 1/7 of a ton, refuses to leave his home for any reason short of fire or revolution, and has arranged his world so perfectly that nothing unexpected is permitted to intrude. That's when the doorbell rang. I glanced at my wristwatch. 9:23. Wolfe's eyes, which had been half closed in contentment, opened to full wit which for him meant approximately normal humances, and fixed on me with the expression of a man who's just been informed that his tailor has retired. "No," he said. Since said, of someone who either didn't know Nero Wolfe's habits or didn't care about them. Both possibilities were equally offensive to him. "It might be important," I suggested, standing. "Nothing is important at 9:20. In the evening, I am reading. You're pretending to work. Fritz is listening to the radio. The world is ordered as it should be." "And yet," I said, moving toward the hall, "someone is at the door." "Then they can ring tomorrow at 11. It's when you're with the orchids." "Precisely. Therefore they cannot disturb me then either." I stepped into the hall and flipped the switch that turned on the stoop light, then checked through the one-way glass panel Fritz had installed in the front door. Standing on the stoop was a woman in her early 30s, dark-haired, with the kind of face that belonged on a magazine cover if the magazine specialized in controlled panic. She wore a gray suit that looked like it cost more than my car, and she was pressing the bell again, even though I was clearly visible through the glass approaching the door. I went back to the office. Female, well-dressed, attractive, and persistent. Also visibly upset? I'd say a potential client, which means money. Wolfe's eyes had closed again. "I am not accepting cases." "You said that last Tuesday." "I said it last Tuesday because it was true last Tuesday. It remains true tonight." "Bank account says otherwise." "The bank account is not my concern. It is yours." "You may handle it? By telling her to go away? By telling her to return at a civilized hour, with an appointment, if her problem still seems worth discussing in daylight?" The doorbell rang. Third time, followed immediately by a fourth. Whoever she was, she had moved past persistent into desperate. "Wolfe," I said, "I'm going to let her in." "You are not." Because if I don't, she's going to wake the neighbors. And then Mrs. Timmons next door will complain to Fritz, and Fritz will give us cold eggs for a week. That did it. Wolf's lips pushed out, then pulled back the facial calisthenics that meant he was actually thinking about something other than beer and orchids. 2 minutes, he said finally. She cannot state her business in 2 minutes. She leaves. Generous, I said, and went to the door. Up close, she was even more rattled than she'd looked through the glass. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hair was perfect. Right. But her eyes had the wild look of someone who'd just watched their house burn down and couldn't quite believe the fire department hadn't arrived yet. Mr. Wolfe, she said before I could even say hello. I'm Archie Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe's assistant, and you are. I need to see him right now, please. She moved forward as if she intended to walk past me, stopped herself, and added, I'm sorry. My name is Vivian Larch. I need help. It's after 9, Mrs. Larch, miss, and I know what time it is. I've been walking around the block for 20 minutes trying to decide whether to ring the bell. Then I decided that if I didn't, I'd go insane. So here I am, and I'm not leaving until someone helps me. I liked her already, not because she was pretty though she was, but because she had the kind of nerve that showed through panic. I stepped back and gestured toward the office. 2 minutes, I said. That's all he's promised. Make them count. Stepped inside, and I closed the door behind her. Vivian Larch walked into the office like a woman entering a courtroom. She was both plaintiff and defendant. Her eyes went straight to Wolfe, who had not bothered to look up from his Buka biography of Bria Savarin that he'd been working through for the past week with the devotion most men reserve for scripture. She stopped 3 feet from his desk and waited. 5 seconds passed, then 10. I'd seen this performance before. Wolfe has a theory that people reveal themselves most clearly in the moments before they speak, and he milks those moments like a dairyman at dawn. Finally, she cleared her throat. Mr. Wolfe. He turned a page. Mr. Wolfe, I'm told you're the best detective in New York. You were told incorrectly, Wolfe said without looking up. I am the best detective in the world. However, I am not currently accepting clients. I'll pay anything you ask. Madame, if you'll forgive my bluntness, that is what everyone says. It is never true. People imagine they'll pay anything until they learn what anything costs. She opened her purse, a small black affair that probably cost more than Fritz's monthly salary, and pulled out a checkbook. Name your retainer. That got his attention. Because of the money, though. Wolfe appreciates money the way a gardener appreciates rainbutt because it told him something. People who offer blank checks before they've even explained their problem are either very rich, very desperate, or very guilty. Sometimes all three. He closed his book with the care of a man. Handily nitroglycerin and looked at her properly for the first time. Sit down, Miss Larch. She took the red leather chair, the one reserved for clients, and perched on its edge like a bird ready to take flight. I got out my notebook and flipped to a fresh page. Your 2 minutes begin now, Wolfe said. What is your problem? My brother is going to be arrested for murder, she said. Tomorrow morning, and he didn't do it. Wolfe's eyebrows went up a 32nd of an inch, which for him was equivalent to leaping from his chair and shouting hallelujah. Indeed. And what makes you certain the police intend to arrest him? Asterisk because Inspector Kramer told me so. 3 hours ago. He came to my apartment and said that unless Paul, my brother, turned himself in by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, they'd come and get him at his office. In handcuffs. Inspector Kramer is not in the habit of offering advance warning. To the families of suspects, what makes you so favored? She flushed. You were ... friendly. Years ago, he thought he was doing me a kindness. Wolfe poured beer, watched the foam settle, and drank. And what is your brother alleged to have murdered? His business partner, Raymond Heller, shot twice in the chest, Tuesday night, in Ray's apartment on Central Park West. I read of it, Wolfe said, which meant he'd glanced at the headline while I was reading him the morning paper. The papers reported it as a robbery. That's what everyone thought at first. The apartment was ransacked. Ray's wallet was missing. But then the police found the gun in Paul's desk drawer at their office. Paul's fingerprints were all over it. And where was your brother Tuesday night? At home, alone. He'd been working. Late at the office, got home around 8, had dinner, and went to bed. No witnesses, no alibi. How convenient for the police, Wolfe murmured. And what is the nature of your brother's business? They run Rana, music publishing company, Larch and Heller Music. They buy rights to songs, license them to recording artists, collect royalties. It's quite successful, or it was. Were they on good terms? For the first time, she hesitated. They argued sometimes about money, about which songs to invest in. But Paul didn't kill him. He couldn't have. Why not? Because Paul is. She paused, searching for words. Paul is careful, methodical. If he were going to kill someone which he wouldn't heed, never leave the gun in his own desk drawer. He'd never be that stupid. Wolfe closed his eyes. Miss Larch, that is not an argument for innocence. It is an argument for competence. The two are not synonymous. I know my brother. So did Cain's mother, I imagine. She stood up, and I thought for a moment she was going to slap him. Instead, she put both hands on his desk and leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, I don't need philosophy. I need help. My brother is going to be arrested in 12 hours for a murder he didn't commit, and if you won't help me, I'll find someone who will. Wolfe opened his eyes and studied her with the expression he usually reserves for a particularly interesting beetle. Sit down, Miss Larch. She sat. You have not told me the truth, he said calmly. Or rather, you have told me only part of the truth, which amounts to the same thing. You claim your brother is innocent, but you do not claim to be surprised that he is suspected. You claim the evidence is circumstantial, but you do not dispute the evidence itself. You offer me unlimited payment, yet you have not asked my fee. All of this suggests that you know something you have not yet shared. She went pale. I don't please, Wolfe said, holding up a hand. I have no patience for denials, and you have already spent one of your 2 minutes. If you wish me to consider your case, you will tell me what you're hiding. If you do not, you may leave. The silence stretched out like taffy. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Outside, a car horn bleated. In the office, Vivian Larch sat frozen, deciding whether to trust a man she'd met 3 minutes ago with whatever secret was eating her alive. Finally, she spoke. Paul and Raymond were more than business partners. They were lovers, had been for 5 years. No one knew, not our family, not their friends, not their other business associates. Raymond was married. He had a wife, 2 children. Paul was terrified of anyone finding out. Now you fear that this relationship will be presented as motive, Wolfe said. They argued Tuesday afternoon in the office. I was there. I work as their bookkeeper. Raymond wanted to leave his wife, make everything public, live openly with Paul. Paul refused, said it would destroy the business, destroy both their reputations. They fought for 20 minutes. I heard every word through the door. Then Raymond stormed out, and Paul locked himself in his office for the rest of the day. Did anyone else hear this argument? I don't know. Maybe. The walls aren't thick. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, which protested with a creak that sounded like a ship's timber in a storm. Miss Larch, you have presented me with an exceedingly unpleasant situation. Your brother had motive, opportunity, and the murder weapon was found in his possession. The police have, as they say, an open and shut case. Moreover, you have given me no reason to believe they are wrong, except your assertion that your brother is too intelligent to be so careless. That is not evidence. It is hope. Then you won't help me. I didn't say that. He picked up his beer. Glass found it empty and scowled at it as if it had betrayed him. I said the situation is unpleasant. It may also be interesting. The two are not mutually exclusive. She leaned forward. Does that mean it means I will consider your case? Not accept it? Consider it? Mr. Goodwin will take your statement, obtain the relevant details, and speak with your brother. Tomorrow morning, after I have spent time with my orchids and had my breakfast, I will decide whether there is sufficient reason to proceed. But Paul will be arrested. Arrested, perhaps. Convicted, not necessarily. The American legal system, for all its flaws, does not execute men on the basis of convenience. Your brother will have time for a proper defense. Whether I provide that defense remains to be seen. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the only one she was going to get. She recognized that, nodded, and settled back in her chair. Flipped to a new page in my notebook and got ready to work. Now then, Wolfe said, tell me everything you know about Raymond Heller's death, beginning with when you last saw him alive. She took a breath and began to talk. By the time Vivian Larch left the brownstone at 10:30, I had 6 pages of notes. Headache from trying to keep track of who knew what when. And the address of Paul Larch's apartment on East 68th Street. Wolfe had dismissed her with instructions to tell her brother nothing except that he should speak freely with me when I arrived in the morning, and to under no circumstances turn himself in to the police until he heard from us. And if Inspector Kramer calls, she'd asked at the door. Tell him the truth, I'd said, that you've retained counsel. He won't like it, but he'll understand it. After she left, I went back to the office and found Wolfe exactly where I'd left him. Eyes closed, fingers interlaced over his middle circumference, looking like a Buddha who'd had too much dinner. Well, I said. Well, what? Are we taking the case? I am considering it. You told her you'd decide tomorrow morning. That means you've already decided. You just enjoy watching people sweat. His eyes opened. I've decided that the case presents certain interesting features. I've not decided whether those features justify the disruption to my schedule and the inevitable unpleasantness of dealing with Inspector Kramer. The retainer she left justifies plenty of disruption, I said, pulling the check from my pocket. It was for $5,000, made out to Nero Wolfe, signed with a hand that had shaken only slightly. That's enough to keep Fritz in butter. For 6 months, Fritz does not eat butter. He uses it, then it'll keep you in beer for 3 months, which is the same thing, he grunted, which I took as agreement. Summarize. I flipped open my notebook. Raymond Heller, age 41, married to Constance Heller for 15 years, 2 kids in private school. Senior partner at Larch and Heller Music. She founded 8 years ago with Paul Larch. Business is successful. Last year they grossed just under $400,000. Heller handled the creative side, finding new talent in songs. Larch handled the money and contracts, and they were lovers, according to Vivian. Yes. She found out by accident 2 years ago when she walked in on them in the office after hours. They swore her to secrecy. She kept it because she loves her brother, and because, as she put it, it was nobody's damn business. A refreshingly practical attitude, Wolfe murmured. Continue. Tuesday afternoon, Heller told Larch he wanted to leave his wife and make their relationship public. Larch refused. They argued loud enough that Vivian heard every word from the outer office. Heller accused Larch of being a coward. Larch said Heller was being selfish and irresponsible. It got ugly. Finally, Heller said he was going to tell his wife everything that night, whether Larch liked it or not, and stormed out around 4:30. Did he what? Tell his wife? According to the papers and to Vivian, who heard it from Kramer Misses. Heller was at a charity dinner until 11 Tuesday night. Heller was shot between 8 and 9. So if he planned to tell her, he never got the chance. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Where was Mrs. Heller's charity dinner? The plaza, some kind of fundraiser for the public library. 200 witnesses. Convenient. 4. Her, yes, and Paul Larch's whereabouts. Like Vivian said, he claims he went home around 6:30, ate a sandwich, listened to the radio, and went to bed at 10. No witnesses, no phone calls, nothing. The building has a doorman, but he was dealing with a plumbing emergency in the basement and didn't see Larch come or go. Remarkably convenient, Wolfe said. What about the gun? Smith & Wesson .38 revolver registered to Paul Larch. He bought it 3 years ago after their office was burglarized. Kept it in his desk drawer. Not locked, not hidden, just sitting there in the top drawer under some contracts. According to Vivian, half the people who worked with them knew it was there, including Raymond Heller. Wolfe poured his third beer, taking his time, watching the foam with the concentration of a man watching his orchids. Bloom, the police found the gun Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, anonymous tip called in to the precinct around noon, said they should check Paul Larch's desk at the office. 2 hours later, Kramer had a warrant and the gun. Anonymous tips, Wolfe said with distaste, are the refuge of cowards and conspirators. Who else works at this music publishing house? I consulted my notes. Besides Paul, Raymond, and Vivian, there are 3 others. Martin Draper, age 35, chief talent scout. He finds the singers and songwriters they invest in. Dorothy Keene, age 28, office manager and assistant to Raymond. Fade, age 52, their lawyer and contracts man. Vivian says they're all good people loyal to the company. Loyalty, Wolfe observed, is what people claim to possess when they wish to avoid scrutiny. What are their salaries? Draper makes $12,000 a year plus commissions. Dorothy makes $6,500. Foley's on retainer for $200 a month, and the partners themselves. It takes $30,000 annually from the business, plus a share of the profits. Last year that meant another $40,000 each. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed. $70,000 for publishing songs. The world has gone mad. And the world's been mad, I said. Just charge more for noticing. Now he almost smiled. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes again. Very well. Tomorrow morning you will visit Paul Larch and take his statement. You will also visit the office and speak with each of the employees. I want to know what they heard Tuesday afternoon, what they thought of the partnership, and whether any of them have theories about the murder that don't involve Paul Larch as the culprit. And if Kramer arrests Larch first thing, then you will visit him in jail. I'm sure you've had practice. Plenty. What about you? I will be with my orchids, as I am every morning from 9 until 11. After that I will think about whether to take the case, about whether the case merits being taken. There is a difference. I started to argue, then thought better of it. When Wolfe gets into one of his philosophical moods, the best strategy is retreat. I closed my notebook, said goodnight, and headed upstairs to bed. But I didn't sleep well. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a question was nagging at me, the same question that I knew was nagging at Wolfe. Even if he wouldn't admit it yet, if Paul Larch didn't kill Raymond Heller, who did? And why would they frame him so clumsily that even his sister could see through it? The next morning at 8:30, I was standing on the sidewalk outside a pre-war apartment building on East 68th Street, watching a doorman who looked like he'd been carved from a particularly grumpy oak tree. Paul Larch, I said for the second time. Apartment 7C, I'm expected. He didn't tell me about no visitors. Maybe he forgot. People do that when they're about to be arrested for murder. That got his attention. His eyes went wide, and he picked up the house phone with the speed of a man who suddenly remembered he had other places to be. 2 minutes later, I was in the elevator. Heading up, Paul Larch opened his door before I could knock. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in a week. He was wearing a good suit that had been put on in a hurry, and his tie was knotted wrong. Mr. Goodwin, he said. That's me. Your sister said you'd talk to me. She said Nero Wolfe might take my case, might being the operative word. May I come in? He stepped back, and I walked into a living room that looked like it had been decorated by someone who'd read a book about modern design but hadn't quite understood it. Everything was clean, expensive, and uncomfortable. A bookshelf held mostly law and business texts. The only personal touch was a framed photograph on the side table, Paul and Raymond, arms around each other's shoulders, standing on what looked like a beach somewhere warm. Paul saw me looking at it. That's from last summer. Told everyone we were going on separate vacations. We went to Havana together for 2 weeks. It was ... He stopped, swallowed hard. It was the happiest I'd ever been. I sat down in a chair that felt like sitting on a geometry textbook. Mr. Larch, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them truthfully, not carefully truthfully. There's a difference. Mr. Wolfe will know if you're lying, and if you are, he won't help you. Understood? Understood? Good. Did you kill Raymond Heller? No. Did you know someone was going to kill him? No. Did you want him dead? He hesitated. Sometimes, when I was angry. When he pushed too hard about going public, wanting someone dead and killing them are different things. True enough. Tell me about Tuesday afternoon. He sat down on the sofa and put his face in his hands. When he spoke, His voice was muffled, but steady. Ray wanted to tell his wife about us. Not someday that night. He said he was tired of lying. Tired of pretending. He said if I loved him, I'd support him. I said, he was being selfish. That it would destroy everything we'd built. That his wife would take him for everything he had. That we'd lose clients. That neither of us would ever work in this business again, I said. He looked up at me, said I wished I'd never met him. How'd he take that? He slapped me, hard enough that my cheek was red for an hour afterward. Then he said I was a coward, and he was going to tell Constance whether I liked it or not. He left around 4:30. That was the last time I saw him alive. What did you do after he left? I sat in my office and felt sorry for myself until about 6:30. Then I came home, ate a sandwich, listened to some music. Billie Holiday, if it matters. Went to bed around 10. See anyone? Talk to anyone? No. The doorman was dealing with a broken pipe in the basement. I came and went through the service entrance. Nobody saw me. I made a note. How'd you learn about Ray's death? Vivian called me Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock. She was hysterical. The police had already been to Ray's apartment, and Constance had called her looking for me. I went to the office, and that's when I saw the police going through everything. Inspector Kramer took me into Ray's office and asked me questions for 2 hours. Where was I Tuesday night? Did Ray have enemies? Did I own a gun? I told him the truth about everything except ... except us. I said Ray and I were just business partners, friends. Did he believe you? I don't know. He let me go, told me not to leave town. Then yesterday afternoon, Vivian came to my apartment and told me Kramer had found my gun in my desk drawer. He gave me until 9 this morning to turn myself in. Why didn't you? Because I didn't do it. His voice cracked. Mr. Goodwin, I loved Ray. I hated him sometimes too, but I loved him. Would never have. I couldn't have. He broke down. Then, and I gave him a minute to pull himself together. When he'd wiped his eyes and gotten his breathing under control, I asked the question Wolfe would want answered. Mr. Larch, who do you think killed Raymond Heller? Looked at me with eyes that had gone from grief to something harder, something angry. I don't know, he said. But whoever it was wanted me to take the fall for it. They did a damn good job. The offices of Larch and Heller Music occupied the 4th floor of a building on West 47th Street, nestled between a theatrical agency and a dance studio where you could hear tap shoes hammering away at all hours like a machine gun with rhythm. The elevator was the kind that made you wonder whether you'd arrive at your destination or plummet to your doom. And the hallway smelled of old carpet and ambition. The frosted glass door said, Larch and Heller Music in gold letters that were starting to peel. I walked in and found myself in a reception area that was trying hard to look successful and almost making it. The furniture was good quality but worn. The carpet had been expensive once, and the walls were covered with framed sheet. Music and photographs of performers I have recognized. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman with red hair, green eyes, and the kind of face that belonged in a nightclub instead of an office. She was typing with furious concentration, attacking the keys like they'd personally offended her. Help you? She said without looking up. I'm looking for Dorothy Keene. You found her. She stopped typing and looked at me properly. And you are? Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. Her expression changed from bored to interested in about half a second. The detective. Hired a detective. His sister did. I need to ask you some questions about Raymond Heller. The police already asked me questions. About 500 of them. Then 5 more won't kill you. Is there somewhere we can talk? She glanced at the closed door behind Herpel Larch's office, presumably then at another door to the left. Ray's office is empty. We can use that. She stood up, and I followed her through the door into a room that still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and expensive cologne. It was bigger than I had expected. With windows overlooking 47th Street and furniture that matched the reception area good. Quality, slightly worn, trying to impress. The desk was clear except for a leather blotter and a silver-framed photograph of Constance Heller, to children who had their father's eyes. Dorothy sat in the client chair and lit a cigarette without offering me one. So what do you want to know? Start with Tuesday afternoon. Did you hear the argument between Paul Larch and Raymond Heller? Everyone heard it? They weren't exactly whispering. What did they say? She blew smoke toward the ceiling. Ray said he was tired of living a lie. Paul said Ray was being irresponsible. Ray said something about telling the truth. Paul said something about destroying everything. Then there was a sound like someone getting slapped, and Ray stormed out. Did you know what they were arguing about? Not specifically, but I'm not. Stupid, Mr. Goodwin. I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. I've heard them make excuses about working late together. I've answered the phone when Ray's wife called, and I've heard the guilt in his voice. So you knew they were lovers. I suspected. There's a difference. Did anyone else suspect? She took a long drag on her cigarette, considering. Martin might have. He's observant. Jim Foley, our lawyer, is oblivious to anything that doesn't involve a contract. Vivian knew that's obvious now, from the way she's been acting. But did anyone else care? I doubt it. Why not? Because in this business, Mr. Goodwin, nobody cares who you sleep with as long as you find them good songs and pay them on time. We publish music for colored singers, white singers, singers who are probably breaking 6 different laws in 6 different states. The only thing that matters is whether they can carry a tune and whether we can make money off them. Liked her. She had the kind of practical cynicism that comes from seeing too much and caring just enough. What did you think of Raymond Heller? He was brilliant. Arrogant, difficult, demanding, but brilliant. He could listen to a song once and tell you whether it would sell 10 copies or 10,000. He could hear a voice and know exactly which. Arrangement would make it shine. She paused, and for the first time her voice softened. He was the best I've ever worked with, and Paul Larch. Paul is smart, methodical, cautious, everything Ray wasn't. They balanced each other. Ray would find the talent. Paul would make sure we could afford it. Ray would make promises. Paul would put them in writing. It worked. Until Tuesday. Where were you Tuesday night? Home, alone, reading a book and listening to the radio if it matters? No alibi, no witnesses, same as everyone else apparently? Oh, did you like Raymond Heller? She stubbed out her cigarette with more force than necessary. Did I like him? No. Did I respect him? Yes. Did I want him dead? Absolutely not. It was the reason this company made money, and I like being employed. Who do you think killed him? If I knew that, I'd have told the police. But I'll tell you what I told Inspector Kramer if Paul Larch killed Ray. He did it in the stupidest way possible. Paul doesn't do anything stupid. He checks every contract 3 times. He reconciles the books to the penny. He plans everything. 6 months in advance. The idea that he'd shoot his partner and then leave the gun in his own desk drawer is about as likely as me suddenly deciding to become a nun. So maybe he panicked. Paul Larch doesn't panic. He gets anxious. He gets careful. He gets methodical. But panic? Never? I made a note.
Who else was here Tuesday afternoon? Martin came in around 3 to talk to Ray about a new singer. Jim Foley was here in the morning working on contracts, but he left before lunch. Vivian was doing the books.
And I was at my desk, trying to pretend I couldn't hear World War III happening in Ray's office. What time did Paul leave? Around 6:30? He looked like hell pale, sweaty, like he'd just lost a fight, which I guess he had. And you? Ain't. Left at 5:30? Had to catch the subway before rush hour got worse. Where's Martin Draper now? She glanced at her watch, probably at Lindy's. He spends every morning there, reading Variety and drinking coffee. It's where all the music people go to gossip and make deals. Can't miss him, tall, thin, always wearing a bow tie like he. Thinks he's Fred Astaire. I stood up. One more question. Did Raymond Heller have any enemies? Anyone who'd want him dead? She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Mr. Goodwin, Ray had enemies the way some people have freckles. Every songwriter whose song he rejected, every performer whose contract he negotiated too hard, every competitor whose deal he stole. But enemies who'd kill him? I don't know. The music business is cutthroat, but usually it's just a figure of speech. Usually. Lindy's was exactly what you'd expect from a Broadway institution allowed. Crowded, smelling of corned beef and ambition, and full of people who were either on their way up or pretending they weren't on their way down. I found Martin Draper in a booth near the back, reading Variety like it was holy. Scripture and drinking coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. Dorothy had been right about the bow tie. It was red with white polka dots, and it matched his suspenders, which took a special kind of confidence or delusion. He was thin as a clarinet, and had the kind of face that looked like it smiled a lot, except right now, it wasn't smiling at all. "Martin Draper?" I said. He looked up, and his eyes did a quick calculation that placed me somewhere between bill collector and process server. He was asking Archie Goodwin. "I work for Nero Wolfe. Paul Larch's sister hired us." His face relaxed by about half. "An inch. The detective. I heard she was looking for help." "Sit down, you want coffee?" "I've had coffee. I want answers." "Don't we all?" He folded his newspaper and pushed it aside. "What do you want to know? Let's start with Tuesday afternoon. You were at the office? For about 20 minutes? I came in around 3 to talk to Ray about a singer I'd found, kid from Jersey, with a voice like honey and heartbreak. Her said we should sign her, but Paul would have to look at the numbers first. Then they started fighting, and I left." "You heard the argument? Hard not to?" "Ray and Paul were going at it like two cats in a sack. I've never heard them that angry at each other." "What were they fighting about?" He shrugged. "Business, I assumed. They disagreed about everything, which songs to buy, which artists to sign, how much to spend. Ray wanted to take risks. Paul wanted to play it safe. It was like that every week." "Did you know they were lovers?" His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, like he was afraid it might explode. "No, I didn't." "Are you sure?" "Very Jesus." Ran a hand through his hair. "That explains a lot." "Like what?" "Like why Ray put up with Paul being so careful all the time. Like why Paul put up with Ray being so reckless. Like why they traveled together so much. I thought they were just—" He shook his head. "I thought they were just good friends." "Did you like Raymond Heller? Like him?" "Ray was the best talent scout in the business except me. He had an ear like a tuning fork and instincts like a bloodhound. But did I like him as a person? Considered? He was all right. Arrogant. Sure. Demanding. Definitely. But he knew his stuff, and he paid me well, and that's enough for me." "Where were you Tuesday night?" "At the Zanzibar Club on 49th Street. There was a new singer debuting, Lena Preston. Heard of her?" "No, you will. She's going to be big." Anyway, I was there from 8 until midnight, watching her set and talking to her manager about a possible deal. "I've got about 50 witnesses. If you need them, I might." "What about Paul Larch?" "What about him? Do you think he killed Raymond Heller?" Martin Draper looked at me like I'd just asked him if the sun was planning to rise in the west tomorrow. "Paul? Kill Ray? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Why?" "Because Paul Larch is the most careful, cautious, risk-averse human being I've ever met. Won't sign a contract without reading it 5 times. Won't buy a song without researching the market for 6 months. He won't even order lunch without checking the menu 3 times in case the prices have changed. The idea that he'd shoot someone in a fit of passion is like saying Einstein would suddenly forget how to add. People do things out of character when they're emotional. Maybe, but then they don't leave the gun in their own desk drawer where any idiot can find it. That's not out of character, that's insane." It was the same thing Dorothy had said, the same thing Vivian had said, the same thing Paul himself had implied. Everyone who knew Paul Larch agreed that he was too smart to have killed Raymond Heller this way, which meant either everyone was wrong about Paul Larch, or someone was trying very hard to make it look like he'd done something stupid. I thanked Martin Draper, left him to his cold coffee and his Variety, and headed back out into the midday chaos of Broadway. I had one more person to talk to, James Foley, the lawyer, and then I needed to get back to the brownstone and report to Wolfe. But as I walked toward the subway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, something obvious, something that everyone had said, but nobody had quite understood. And knowing Wolfe, he'd already figured out what it was. James Foley kept an office on Madison Avenue. It's the kind of place where the furniture costs more than most people's cars, and the secretary looks like she's been trained to spot deadbeats at 50 paces. She informed me that Mr. Foley was with a client. Could I wait, and would I like some coffee? I said yes to waiting and no to coffee. I had enough coffee to float. A battleship hand settled into a leather chair that was probably worth more than my monthly salary. 20 minutes later, a door opened, and out came a nervous-looking man clutching a briefcase like it was a life preserver, followed by James Foley himself. Foley was everything a successful lawyer should be. 52, silver-haired, well-dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly how much everyone in the room is worth, how much of it he can get. He looked at me with the mild interest of a man who's seen everything twice and wasn't impressed the first time. "Mr. Goodwin, my secretary said you wanted to speak with me about the Heller matter if you have a few minutes." "I have 15. After that, I'm due in court." He gestured to his office. "Please." The office was exactly what I'd expected. Wood paneling, law books, a desk the size of a Buick. He sat behind it, and I sat in front of it, and we both pretended we were equals. Which we weren't. "You represent Paul Larch?" he asked. "His sister hired Nero Wolfe. I work for Mr. Wolfe." "Ah, the famous detective. I've read about him in the papers. Never leaves his house, keeps orchids, weighs a ton, that him. Close enough. You were the lawyer for Larch and Heller Music?" "Still am, technically. Though with Ray dead and Paul likely headed for prison, I'm not sure how much longer the company will survive." He said it with the emotion of a man discussing the weather. "What do you want to know? Let's start with Tuesday. You were at the office that morning? From 9 until noon?" "I was reviewing contracts for 3 new artists they'd signed. Standard licensing agreements, royalty splits, the usual paperwork." "Did you see or hear anything unusual?" "Unusual how?" "Arguments? Tension? Anything that suggested Paul and Raymond were having problems?" He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Mr. Goodwin, Paul and Raymond were always having problems. It's what happens when you put a dreamer and a pragmatist in business together. Ray wanted to take risks. Paul wanted to minimize them. Ray wanted to sign every talented kid who walked through the door. Paul wanted to make sure we could afford to pay them. They argued about it constantly. Did you know they were lovers?" He didn't even blink. I suspected I didn't ask. In my line of work, you learn that the less you know about your clients' personal lives, the easier it is to represent them effectively. Very practical. Very necessary. Personal entanglements complicate business relationships. And business relationships are complicated enough without adding romance to the mix. "Where were you Tuesday night?" "At home with my wife. We had dinner at 7, listened to Bob Hope on the radio, and went to bed at 10:30. She confirmed. "It if you need her to." "Did you like Raymond Heller?" For the first time, Foley's professional mask slipped just slightly. I respected him. Ray was brilliant at what he did. But like him? No. Ray was arrogant, impulsive, and had a tendency to make promises he expected other people to keep. He'd sign artists without checking if we could afford them, negotiate deals without consulting me, and then expect me to make it all legal after the fact. It was exhausting in Paul Larch. Paul is meticulous, careful, and paranoid about liability, which makes him an excellent business partner and a lawyer's dream client. He reads every contract, questions every clause, and never makes a promise he can't keep. "Do you think he killed Raymond Heller?" Foley looked at me like I'd just suggested the moon was made of cheese. "Paul Larch is many things, Mr. Goodwin, but he's not stupid. You'd have to be monumentally stupid to shoot your business partner, and then leave the gun in your own desk drawer for the police to find. So, no, I don't think he killed Ray. I think someone killed Ray and went to considerable trouble to make it look like Paul did it. Who? If I knew that, I'd have told the police. But I'll tell you this, Ray Heller had a gift for making enemies. Every deal he made, someone came out on the losing end. Every artist he signed, someone else got rejected. Every song he bought, someone else's song got passed over. The music business is competitive, Mr. Goodwin. People hold grudges. Anyone specific?" He considered. "There's a songwriter named Eddie Marsh. Ray rejected 3 of his songs last month, told him he had no talent and should find another line. Of work, Eddie didn't take it. Well, showed up at the office twice, drunk, making threats. Dorothy had to call the police to remove him. I made a note. Anyone else? A competitor, Arnold Kessler, runs a publishing house on 42nd Street. He and Ray bid against each other for a contract with a singer named Billy Watts last year. Ray won, Kessler lost, and Kessler accused Ray of cheating, said Ray had paid Billy under the table to sign with Larch and Heller instead. Nothing was ever proved, but Kessler's been bad-mouthing Ray around town ever since. Sounds like motive. Maybe, or maybe it's just business. You don't kill someone over a contract, Mr. Goodwin. You sue them, usually. Usually. At his watch, I'm afraid that's all the time I have. If you need anything else, my secretary can schedule another appointment. I stood up. One last question. The gun that killed Raymond Heller was registered to Paul Larch, kept in his desk drawer. How many people knew it was there? Everyone who worked at the office. Paul made no secret of it. After we were burglarized 3 years ago, he bought the gun and told us all he'd be keeping it in his desk for security. He even showed us how to use it in case of emergency, including Raymond Heller. At the time I got back to the brownstone, it was 20 minutes past 1. Wolfe would be in the dining room, working through whatever culinary masterpiece Fritz had prepared, and I'd be expected to join him and report my findings between courses. It was one of his ironclad rules business could be discussed at the dinner table, but only after he'd had at least 3 bites and declared himself satisfied with the food. I hung up my coat and hat and went to the dining room. Wolfe was exactly where I had expected him, working through what looked like a roasted duck with orange sauce, and doing it with the concentration of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. Fritz saw me come in and immediately brought me a plate. I ate 3 bites. Wolfe ate 7, and he put down his fork, dabbed at his lips with his napkin, and said, "Well, Larch is either innocent or the best actor since Barrymore. He claims he didn't kill Heller, says he loved him despite their arguments, and has no idea who'd want to frame him." I believe him. Belief is not evidence. No, but it's a start. I talked to Dorothy Keene, the office manager. Smart woman, observant, practical. She suspected Paul and Raymond were lovers, but didn't care. Says Paul's too methodical to have killed Ray so sloppily. Martin Draper, the talent scout, had the same reaction, claims Paul's too careful to have left the gun in his own desk. And the lawyer, James Foley, cold as yesterday's fish, but sharp. Also thinks Paul's innocent, also thinks someone framed him deliberately. He gave me 2 names: Eddie Marsh, a songwriter Ray insulted, and Arnold Kessler, a competitor who's been nursing a grudge. Wolfe cut another piece of duck and chewed it thoughtfully. "And what is your impression, Archie?" "My impression is that everyone who knows Paul Larch agrees on one thing: he's too smart to have killed Raymond Heller the way it was done, which means either everyone's wrong about him or someone's counting on everyone thinking exactly that." Precisely. Wolfe reached for his wine glass. "What else?" I consulted my notes. Raymond Heller was shot Tuesday night between 8 and 9. His wife was at a charity dinner at the plaza with 200 witnesses. Paul Larch was home alone with no alibi. Dorothy Keene was home alone with no alibi. Martin Draper was at the Zanzibar Club with 50 witnesses. James Foley was home with his wife. The gun was found Wednesday afternoon after an anonymous tip. Anonymous tips, Wolfe said with distaste, are rarely anonymous to someone. The question is, who made the call, and how did they know where to find the gun? Anyone who worked at the office knew Paul kept it in his desk drawer? Yes, but knowing where the gun was kept and knowing it had been used to commit murder are 2 different things. Whoever called the police knew both. I put down my fork. You're saying the killer worked at Larch and Heller? I'm saying the killer had access to the office and knowledge of its operations. Whether they were an employee or merely familiar with the office remains to be determined. That narrows it down to about 5 people. 6, Wolfe corrected. You've forgotten Constance Heller? I blinked. Raymond Heller's wife? She was at a charity dinner, so we are told. Yet dinner parties end. Mr. Goodwin and guests go home. The question is, when did Mrs. Heller leave the plaza? And where did she go afterward? The papers said Heller was shot between 8 and 9. The charity dinner didn't end until 11. The papers also said the time of death was estimated, not confirmed. Medical examiners can be mistaken by an hour or more in either direction. It's worth investigating. I made a note to check on Constance Heller's movements. Anything else? In pushed his plate away, and leaned back. Yes, something has been bothering me since Miss Larch first came to see us last night. Something in her account that doesn't fit. What? Raymond threatened to tell his wife about their relationship that evening. Correct? Correct? And yet Raymond Heller was shot in his apartment between 8 and 9 before his wife returned home from her dinner engagement. If Raymond intended to tell his wife about his relationship with Paul, why would he be alone? In his apartment, when he could have been at the plaza, interrupting her dinner and forcing the confrontation he'd promised? I thought about it. Maybe he changed his mind. Perhaps he never intended to tell her at all. Perhaps the argument was about something else entirely, and Miss Larch misunderstood what she heard. She said she heard every word. Said she heard words, but did she understand their meaning? Wolfe opened his eyes and looked at me directly. Archie, people hear what they expect to hear, particularly when listening through closed doors. Miss Larch knew her brother and Raymond were lovers. When she heard them arguing about truth and lies, about living openly and destroying everything, she naturally assumed they were arguing about their relationship. But what if they were arguing about something else? Like what? That, Wolfe said, is what we need to determine. Tomorrow morning, you will return to the office and examine their business records. I want to know what deals they were working on, what contracts they'd signed, what artists they'd recently acquired. I want to know who stood to gain from Raymond Heller's death and who stood to lose. And what will you be doing? I will be with my orchids. And after that I will think. About what? About why a man who intended to tell his wife the truth was murdered before he could do so? And about why his killer went to such obvious trouble to frame a man who everyone agrees is too intelligent to be framed. He picked up his wine glass and drank. And in that gesture I recognized something I'd seen before. The moment when Nero Wolfe stops being annoyed and starts being interested. The case had him hooked. Friday morning arrived with rain, the kind of steady. Makes New York look like a black and white photograph and turns everyone's mood as sour as week-old milk. I left the brownstone at 8:30 with Wolfe's instructions ringing in my ears. Examine the business records, talk to anyone I'd missed, and find out what Raymond Heller had been doing in the hours before his death that didn't involve telling his wife about Paul Larch. The offices of Larch and Heller Music were quieter than they'd been the day before. Dorothy Keene was at her desk, but her typewriter was silent, and she was staring at the phone like it might bite her. "Mr. Goodwin," she said when she saw me. "Back again? I need to look at your business records, recent contracts, deals in progress. Anything that might tell me what Raymond Heller was working on this week?" She gestured toward Raymond's office. "Help yourself. The police already went through everything, so it's all in complete chaos. You're welcome to make it worse. Always happy to oblige. Is Vivian here?" She called in sick. First time in 3 years. I think reality finally caught up with her. I went into Raymond's office and found she hadn't been exaggerating about the chaos. File cabinets hung open, papers were scattered across the desk, and someone, presumably Inspector Kramer, or one of his men, had gone through everything with the delicacy of a bull in a china shop. I started with the desk. The top drawer held pens, paper clips, a flask of bourbon that was half empty, and a stack of business cards. The second drawer had correspondence letters from artists, queries from songwriters, rejection notices written in Raymond's bold handwriting. The third drawer was locked. I found the key taped to the underside of the desk. Blotter because people who think they're being clever are usually just being predictable, and opened it. Inside was a ledger book, the kind accountants use to track money that doesn't appear on official records. I flipped it open and started reading. What I found made me whistle. For the past 6 months, Raymond Heller had been making regular payments to someone identified only as EM. $500 a month, paid in cash, with notations like consultation fee and research services. The payments had started in October and continued through March. The last payment was dated April 10th, 4 days before Raymond was. Mew, RDEREDEM, Eddie Marsh. The songwriter James Foley had mentioned the one Raymond had rejected. It's the one who'd shown up drunk making threats. Except if Raymond had rejected Eddie's songs, why was he paying him $500 a month? Made notes and kept searching. In a file marked pending contracts, I found something even more interesting. A deal memo for a singer named Stella Dumont, dated 2 weeks ago. According to the memo, Larch and Heller had agreed to buy the exclusive rights to all her recordings for the next 3 years for a total payment of $20,000. The memo was signed by Raymond Heller, but there was a problem. Clipped to the memo was a handwritten note from Paul Larch. Rai, we can't afford this. Cash reserves are at $12,000. We'd need to borrow $8,000 to make this work. I'm voting no to Mo. We need to discuss. P and below that in Raymond's handwriting, we'll find the money. Trust me, R. I was starting to see why they'd argued. I copied down the details and moved to the filing cabinet. In a folder marked Kessler Complaint, I found correspondence between Arnold Kessler and Larch and Heller dating back 8 months. Kessler had accused Raymond of paying Billy Watts under the table to break his contract and sign with them instead. Raymond had denied it. Kessler had threatened to sue. Raymond had threatened to countersue for libel. The correspondence had ended 3 months ago, with a letter from James Foley informing Kessler that any further contact would be considered harassment. But tucked into the back of the folder was something that didn't belong, a bank receipt, dated 6 months ago, showing a cash withdrawal of $5,000 from the Larch and Heller business account. The withdrawal had been authorized by Raymond Heller and marked business expense confidential. $5,000, right around the time Billy Watts had signed with them instead of Kessler. I sat back in Raymond's chair and tried to put the pieces together. Raymond had paid someone, possibly Billy Watts, $5,000 under the table. He'd been paying Eddie Marsh $500 a month for reasons unknown. He'd committed to a $20,000 deal without having the money to pay for it, and for days after his last payment to Eddie Marsh, someone had shot him twice in the chest and left Paul Larch's gun at the scene. The rain hammered against the window like it was trying to get in. I gathered up my notes, locked the drawer, and went back to the reception area. Dorothy was still staring at the phone. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Maybe tell me about Eddie Marsh." She lit a cigarette and blew smoke at the ceiling. "Eddie's a songwriter, or he thinks he is. He brought Ray 3 songs last month, all terrible, derivative, and about 15 years out of date. Ray told him he had no talent and should consider another line of work. Eddie didn't take it well." "Not well?" "He showed up here twice, drunk, threatening to make Ray pay. The second time, I had to call the police to remove him. They took him away in handcuffs, and I haven't seen him since." "Did Raymond ever mention paying Eddie for anything?" She looked at me sharply. "Paying him? For what?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. $500 a month for 6 months. Any ideas?" "None. Ray didn't pay people whose work he rejected. That would be insane. Maybe Eddie was blackmailing him." "Blackmailing him with what?" "It's also what I'm trying to figure out." I left her smoking and thinking and headed down to the street. The rain had picked up, and I didn't have an umbrella, which meant I was going to arrive at my next destination, looking like a drowned rat. But I had Eddie Marsh's address from the correspondence file, and I wanted to talk to him before someone else did, like Inspector Kramer, for instance. Eddie Marsh lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Hell's Kitchen. It's a kind of building where the stairs creaked ominously and the hallways smelled like boiled cabbage and broken dreams. I climbed to the 4th floor, found apartment 4D, and knocked no. "Answer." I knocked again, louder. "Eddie Marsh, I need to talk to you." Still nothing. I tried the doorknob. Locked, but the lock was the kind that any competent burglar could open with a hairpin in 30 seconds, and I'd spent time with some very competent burglars. 2 minutes later, I was inside. The apartment was small, 1 room with a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The furniture consisted of a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a piano that had seen better days about 30 years ago. Sheet music was scattered everywhere on the table, on the bed, on the floor, covering every available surface like snow. I picked up a few pages. Songs about love, loss, heartbreak, all the standards. The handwriting was neat, the notes were precise. but the melodies were exactly what Dorothy had said. Derivative and 15 years out of date. Eddie Marsh was writing songs that might have been popular in 1935, but this was 1950, and the world had moved on. On the table was a ledger book, similar to the one I'd found in Raymond's office. I opened it and found a record of deposits, $500 a month for 6 months. All marked consultation fee from L&H Music. The last entry was April 10th, the same date as Raymond's last payment. Next to the ledger was a stack of photographs. I picked them up and started flipping through them, and then I understood everything the photographs showed. Raymond Heller and a young man mid-20s, dark-haired, handsome in the way that makes teenage girls scream and their mothers disapprove. They were at a restaurant, at a nightclub, at what looked like a hotel room. In every photograph they were together, close, intimate. The kind of photographs that would end a career and destroy a marriage if they ever became public. The young man wasn't Paul Larch. I turned the photographs over. Out. On the back of each one, in neat handwriting, Ray and Johnny. October 1949. Raymond Heller had been having an affair with someone else. Someone named Johnny. And Eddie Marsh had photographs to prove it. I was still staring at the photographs when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. Official footsteps. The kind that belong to men who carry badges and don't bother. Knocking, I shoved the photographs in my pocket, crossed to the window, and looked down. 4 floors to the alley below, no fire escape, no convenient ledge. It's just a straight drop and a likely broken ankle. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Police, a voice said, "Open up." Instead, I went to the bathroom, opened. The window, which was barely big enough for a child, let alone a full-grown man, and squeezed through just as I heard the door to the apartment splinter open behind me. I dropped onto the fire escape 1 floor down, climbed down the ladder to the alley, and walked away as casually as I could manage, while soaking wet, muddy, and in possession of photographs that proved Raymond Heller had been cheating on his boyfriend with someone else. It was, all things considered, not my best morning. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was 2 o'clock, and I looked like I'd gone swimming in my clothes. Fritz took one look at me and immediately disappeared to draw a bath and find dry clothes, while Wolfe looked up from his lunchbrook trout with lemon butter and raised his eyebrows. "You appear to have had an eventful morning." "Good." "Say that?" I peeled off my wet jacket. Raymond Heller was being blackmailed. Wolfe put down his fork. "By whom?" "Eddie Marsh." The songwriter Raymond rejected. Turns out Eddie had photographs of Raymond with another man, not Paul Larch. Someone named Johnny. Raymond was paying Eddie $500 a month to keep quiet. "And you obtained these photographs, how?" "I broke into Eddie's apartment, and then I climbed out the bathroom window when the police showed up to do the same thing." "Archie, I know, but I got the photographs." "Right." I pulled them from my pocket, slightly damp but still intact hand, spread them on the table. Raymond Heller was having an affair behind Paul's back. Eddie found out somehow and started blackmailing him. That gives Eddie motive to kill Raymond if Raymond refused to keep paying or threatened to go to the police. Wolfe picked up one of the photographs and examined it with the expression of a man inspecting a particularly unpleasant beetle. "Who is Johnny? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." "Do so." "Also, while you were climbing out windows and fleeing from the police, Inspector Kramer called. He would like us to visit him at his office at 4 o'clock. He says it's urgent." "Did he say what about?" "He did not. But I suspect it concerns Paul Larch, who was arrested this morning at 9 o'clock and is currently being held at the Tombs. Pending arraignment." I swore. Vivian's going to be furious. Miss Larch's emotional state is not my concern. The truth is. And the truth, Archie, is becoming considerably more complicated than it first appeared. He pushed the photographs back toward me. "Find out who Johnny is. Find out if he's still alive. And find out where he was Tuesday night when Raymond Heller was shot. And then we'll see whether we're defending an innocent man or merely uncovering a different crime entirely." Inspector Kramer's office at the precinct looked exactly the way it always did. smoke-filled and decorated with the kind of institutional despair that comes from 30 years of dealing with liars, criminals, and the occasional honest. A citizen who wandered in by mistake. Kramer himself was behind his desk, working on what looked like his 10th cigar of the day and his 100th headache of the week. "Goodwin," he said when I walked in. "Where's Wolfe?" "At home, where he always is. You know, he doesn't leave the brownstone." "Yeah, I know. I keep hoping he'll make an exception, but apparently the man's got principles." He gestured to a chair. "Sit down. We need to talk." I sat. "About Paul Larch." "About Paul Larch, Raymond. Heller, and this whole goddamn mess that keeps getting messier every time I look at it." He blew smoke at the ceiling. "You working for Larch?" "Sister hired us. She thinks he's innocent. She would. Sisters always think their brothers are innocent. Mothers too. Wives are smarter. They know better." He tapped ash into a tray. "That was already overflowing. What's Wolfe think? He thinks the evidence against Paul Larch is too convenient. And Wolfe doesn't believe in convenient. Neither do I, but sometimes convenient is just convenient. Guy shoots his lover in a fit of rage, panics, runs home, doesn't think to get rid of the gun. It happens. Not to Paul Larch. Everyone who knows him says he's too methodical for that. Everyone who knows him is biased. They don't want to believe their friend's a murderer." He leaned forward. "Look, Goodwin, I'm going to level with you. We got Paul Larch cold. His gun, his motive, no alibi. The DA's already talking about charging him with first-degree murder. But there's something that bothers me." "What? The anonymous?" "Tip someone called us Wednesday afternoon, told us to check Larch's desk drawer. Wouldn't give their name, wouldn't stay on the line. Just said we'd find what we were looking for and hung up. And that bothers you because anonymous? Tips come from two kinds of people, cowards and killers. And if the killer's the one who called in the tip, that means they went to a lot of trouble to frame Paul Larch, which means maybe they had a better reason than just wanting to see him take the fall." I thought about the photographs in my pocket, about Eddie Marsh and his blackmail scheme, about Raymond Heller's secret affair with someone named Johnny, about $500 a month, and $5,000 in cash withdrawals. "Inspector," I said carefully, "what if I told you Raymond Heller was being blackmailed?" Kramer's cigar stopped halfway to his mouth. "By who? Songwriter named Eddie Marsh? He had photographs of Raymond with another man, not Paul Larch. Someone named Johnny. Raymond was paying Eddie to keep quiet." "Where are these photographs? I have them. I got them from Eddie's apartment this morning, right before your men showed up to search the place." "You broke into his apartment?" "I prefer to think of it as conducting an investigation. I prefer to think of it as a felony." He held out his hand. "Give me the photographs." I pulled them from my pocket and handed them over. Kramer spread them on his desk and studied them with the expression of a man who just found out his favorite restaurant had rats. "Jesus," he muttered. "Heller was cheating on the guy who loved him with some kid who looks like he belongs in the movies. Any idea who Johnny is?" "No, but I'll find out." He gathered up the photographs and put them in his desk drawer. "This changes things. Marsh was blackmailing Heller. That gives him motive. If Heller refused to pay or threatened to go to the police, Marsh might have killed him. That's what I thought. Where's Marsh now? I don't know. He wasn't at his apartment when I was there. And he wasn't there when your men arrived either, or they'd have arrested him." Kramer swore and picked up his phone. "I want an APB out on Eddie Marsh. Songwriter, mid-30s, lives in Hell's Kitchen. Last known address," he looked at me. 342 West 48th Street, apartment 4D. He repeated it into the phone, then hung up. "If we find him, I'll let you know. In the meantime, you tell Wolfe that Paul Larch stays in custody until we sort this out. The evidence against him is still solid. Blackmail or no blackmail. Fair enough? What about Constance Heller? What about her? Where was she Tuesday night?" Really, Kramer gave me a long look. "At a charity dinner at the plaza?" We checked. She arrived at 7:30, sat at a table with 6 other people, gave a speech at 9, and left around 11:15. 200 witnesses. And after she left, she went home. Her driver confirms it. Got back to her apartment on Central Park West around 11:30, found the police already there, broke down crying. We had a doctor sedate her. What time was Raymond shot? Medical examiner puts it between 8 and 9 based on body temperature and lividity. But those estimates can be off by an hour or more in either direction. So she could have left the dinner early, shot her husband, and come back. Except she didn't leave early. Like I said, she gave a speech at 9. And even if she had left early, why would she shoot her husband? She didn't know about Paul Larch. She didn't know about Johnny. And as far as we can tell, she had no reason to want him dead. Maybe she found out about Paul or Johnny, or both. Then why not just divorce him? Why kill him? Kramer stubbed out his cigar with more force than necessary. Look, Goodwin, I know you and Wolfe like to complicate things. It's what you do, but sometimes the simple answer is the right answer. Paul Larch shot Raymond Heller, panicked, ran home, and left the gun in his desk where we found it. End of story. Except for the anonymous tip. Tip. He lit another cigar, which I'm working on. Get out of here and let me do my job. I stood up. One more thing. You said Raymond was shot twice in the chest. Close range? It's very close. Powder burns on his shirt. Whoever shot him was standing less than 3 feet away. So he knew his killer, trusted them enough to let them get close, or didn't see them coming. Either way, it doesn't help your client. He waved his cigar at the door. Now get out before I arrest you for breaking and entering. I got back to the brownstone at 5:30 to find Wolfe in his chair, drinking beer and reading the same biography of Bria Sovereign he'd been working through all week. He looked up when I came in. Well, I reported everything Kramer's confirmation that Paul Larch was still the prime suspect, the APB on Eddie Marsh, Constance Heller's ironclad alibi, and the fact that Raymond had been shot at close range by someone he trusted. When I finished, Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Archie, what time did Miss Larch say her brother left the office Tuesday evening? I checked my notes. 6:30. Dorothy confirmed it said he looked like hell, pale and sweaty. And what time did Raymond Heller leave? According to Dorothy, he stormed out around 4:30 right after the argument. Where did he go? No idea. Nobody saw him after he left the office. And he was shot between 8 and 9 in his apartment on Central Park West. That's what Kramer said. Wolfe closed his eyes. 4.5 hours. What was Raymond Heller doing for 4.5 hours between leaving his office and being shot in his apartment? Maybe he went home early. His wife was at a charity dinner. Why would he go home to an empty apartment when he just threatened to tell her the truth about his relationship with Paul Larch? Maybe he changed his mind about telling her. Or maybe, Wolfe said slowly, he was never planning to tell her at all. Miss Larch assumed the argument was about their relationship because that's what she expected to hear. But what if it was about something else entirely? Like what? Like money. Like blackmail. Like a $20,000 deal that Paul Larch opposed and Raymond Heller insisted on pursuing. He opened his eyes. Archie, I need you to find out who Johnny is. Not tomorrow, tonight. And I need you to find out if Raymond Heller met with anyone between 4:30 and 8 o'clock Tuesday evening. How am I supposed to do that? It's the same way you do everything, by being persistent, charming, and occasionally breaking the law when necessary. He poured more beer. Also, I need you to call Miss Larch and ask her a question. What question? Ask her if she knew about Johnny. Wolfe, she said Raymond was having an affair with her brother. Why would she know about Johnny? Because if Raymond was being blackmailed by Eddie Marsh, and if Eddie was demanding payment, and if Raymond needed money he didn't have, then someone must have known about the blackmail. And the most likely person is the one who handled the books. Vivian? Vivian. I reached for the phone. And if she knew about the blackmail, then she's been lying to us from the beginning. And we need to know why. Vivian Larch answered on the third ring. Her voice sounded like she'd been crying for hours, which she probably had, Mr. Goodwin. I need to ask you a question, Miss Larch, and I need you to answer it honestly, because your brother's life might depend on it. What question? Did you know Raymond Heller was being blackmailed? Silence. Long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then very quietly, yes. How long have you known? Since October. I saw the payments in the books, $500 a month to someone called EMI. Asked Raymond about it. He told me it was none of my business. But I'm the bookkeeper, Mr. Goodwin. Everything is my business. Did you know about Johnny? Another silence. Yes. Did Paul know? No. I never told him. Raymond begged me not to. He said it was just a fling. That it didn't mean anything, that he loved Paul and didn't want to hurt him. Her voice cracked. I should have told him. If I'd told him, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe. Or maybe it would have happened anyway. I paused. Miss Larch, where were you Tuesday night? Really, I told you I was at home. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. I didn't see anyone. Didn't talk to anyone. Just like Paul. Ah, she laughed bitterly. We're a family of people with no alibis, Mr. Goodwin. Very convenient for whoever killed Raymond. Did Raymond tell you where he was going after he left the office Tuesday afternoon? No, he just stormed out. I assumed he was going home. Didn't go home. His wife was at a charity dinner. So where did he go for 4.5 hours? I don't know. Maybe he went to see Johnny. Maybe he went to see Eddie. Maybe he just drove around trying to decide what to do. Or maybe, I said, he went to meet someone else entirely, someone we haven't thought of yet. I thanked her and hung up. Wolfe was watching me with the expression of a man who'd just solved a particularly difficult crossword puzzle and was waiting for someone to admire his work. She knew, I said. Of course she knew. She's the bookkeeper. She sees every dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out. He leaned back. The question now is, who else knew about the blackmail? Who else knew Raymond was desperate for? Money? And who else had access to Paul Larch's gun? Everyone who worked at the office. Precisely. Which brings us back to where we started with a circle of suspects, all of whom had opportunity and none of whom have alibis, except Martin. Draper, he was at the Zanzibar Club. Was he? Or does he merely claim to have been there? Wolfe picked up his book. Archie, tomorrow morning you will verify Mr. Draper's alibi. You will also locate Johnny and determine his whereabouts Tuesday evening. And you will find out what Raymond Heller was doing between 4:30 and 8 o'clock that night. Is that all? For now? After that, we'll see if the pieces fit together or if we're still missing something crucial. And what will you be doing? I will be thinking about anonymous tips, blackmail payments, and the psychology of men who keep secrets. He opened his book. Now go away. Fritz is making sweetbreads for dinner, and I need to prepare myself mentally. For the experience, I went upstairs to change clothes and think. Somewhere in the tangle of lies, affairs, blackmail, and murder, there was a pattern, a logic, a reason why everything had happened the way it did. And knowing Wolfe, he'd already figured out what it was. He just hadn't told me yet. Saturday morning, I woke up with the rain still, hammering against my window and the feeling that I was chasing ghosts through a maze that kept rearranging itself. But I had my orders from Wolfe, and Wolfe's orders are like the sunrise, inevitable. It's predictable, and best not argued with. First stop, the Zanzibar Club on 49th Street. At 10 in the morning, it looked like every nightclub looks in daylight shabby. Tired and faintly embarrassed about what goes on there after dark. The door was locked, but I knocked until a janitor opened it and told me the manager wouldn't be in until noon. I waited. At 12:15, a man who looked like he'd been poured into his suit and forgotten to say when showed up with keys and the expression of someone who deeply regretted every decision that had led him to this moment. We're closed, he said. No, I need to ask about Tuesday night. He had a singer debuting, Lena Preston. His face brightened slightly. Lena, yeah, hell of a voice. She's going places. Was Martin Draper here watching her set? Marty? Sure, he was here from 8 until we closed at 2. Sat at the same table all night. Drank club soda Marty. Doesn't drink when he's working. And talked to Lena's manager about signing her. You're certain about the time?
Positive.
I remember because Marty bought champagne for the whole house when Lena finished her last number. Cost him $50? That kind of thing, you remember? So Martin Draper's alibi was solid. When suspect down, next stop, tracking down Johnny. I started with the obvious, called Dorothy. Keen at the office and asked if she'd ever heard Raymond mention anyone named Johnny. Johnny? She thought about it. Was Johnny Desmond the singer? Ray tried to sign him last year, but he went with RCA instead. And Johnny Mercer. But everyone knows him. Why? Just following up on something. Anyone else? Not that I can. Think of Ray knew a lot of people. Mr. Goodwin, half of them were probably named Johnny. I thanked her and hung up. Then I pulled out the photographs I'd taken from Eddie Marsh's apartment and looked at them again. The young man in the pictures, Johnny, looked like he was in his mid-20s, well-dressed, confident, the kind of person who belonged in nightclubs, in expensive restaurants, not cheap apartments. In one of the photographs, Johnny was wearing a distinctive ring, gold with a blue stone, possibly a sapphire. In another, there was a matchbook on the table with a logo I recognized. The Stork Club. I called the Stork Club and asked for the Mater D when he came on the line. I described Johnny as best I could. Mid-Wendy's, dark hair, handsome, wore a gold ring with a blue stone. "Oh, you mean Johnny Valentino?" the Mater D said immediately. "He's here most weekends. Singer does a show at the Blue Note on Friday and Saturday nights. Does he come in alone? Sometimes with friends, sometimes with friends." "Well, you know how it is. I know how it is. Was he there Tuesday night?" "Tuesday. Let me check." I heard papers rustling. No, Tuesday we were closed for a private party. Wouldn't have been open to the public. "Do you have an address for him?" "Not supposed to give out that information. This is a murder investigation. Then you should talk to the police." I thanked him and hung up. Then I called Kramer. "Goodwin." He said, "What now?" "I need an address for Johnny Valentino. Singer performs at the Blue Note, hangs out at the Stork Club." "Why?" "Because he's the Johnny in those photographs. The one Raymond Heller was having an affair with." Kramer swore. "Hold on, more rustling." "John Valentino, age 26, lives at the Chelsea Hotel, room 511. No criminal record. Works as a singer and waiter. Anything else?" "That's enough." "Thanks, Inspector." "Goodwin, if you're about to do something stupid, don't." "Would I do that? Every damn time?" He hung up. The Chelsea Hotel had the kind of bohemian charm that comes from not caring what people do as long as they pay their rent and don't set the building on fire. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and knocked on room 511. Johnny Valentino opened the door wearing a silk bathrobe and an expression that suggested he'd been asleep about 15 minutes ago and wasn't happy about being awake now. Up close, he was even more handsome than in the photographs. The kind of handsome that makes women sigh and men either jealous or interested, depending on their inclinations. "Yeah," said John Valentino, who's asking. "Archie Goodwin." "Investigating the murder of Raymond Heller." His face went pale. "Ray's dead? You didn't know?" "I've been in Atlantic City for a week, singing gig. Just got back last night." He stepped back. "Come in." The room was small, but expensively furnished, or at least furnished with expensive things. A good suit hanging in the open closet, silk shirts, leather shoes. The furniture was hotel standard, but there were personal touches. Photographs on the dresser, sheet music on the table, a record player in the corner. "When's the last time you saw Raymond?" I asked. Johnny sat on the bed and put his face in his hands. 2 weeks ago, we had dinner at his place. His apartment, not his home. He kept a place in the city for ... well, you know, it's for affairs. For privacy. He was married, had Paul. But sometimes he wanted something different. Someone younger. Someone who didn't ask questions or make demands. That was you. That was me. I knew what I was getting into. Ray was generous. He helped with my rent, bought me nice things, introduced me to people in the business. I knew it wasn't going to last forever. I didn't think it would end like this. "Did you know about Paul Larch?" "Of course. Ray talked about him sometimes. Said Paul was the love of his life, but that he felt suffocated by him, and that Paul wanted too much commitment, honesty, forever. Ray wasn't built for forever. Was Eddie Marsh blackmailing him?" Johnny's eyes went wide. "How did you—" "I found the photographs in Eddie's apartment, and I found the payments in Raymond's records. $500 a month for 6 months. Damn." Johnny stood up and walked to the window. "Eddie was Ray's pianist for a while. A year. Ago he came by the apartment one night when Ray and I were there. Saw us together. Started taking photographs. When Ray fired him, told him his songs were garbage. Eddie said he'd show the photographs to Paul and to Ray's wife unless Ray paid him. And Raymond paid. What choice did he have? If Paul found out, it would have destroyed him. If Constance found out, it would have destroyed Ray's marriage and probably his business. So he paid $500 a month to keep Eddie quiet. Till, when, forever I guess, Eddie had him over a barrel. I thought about the $20,000 deal Raymond had committed to. The deal Paul had opposed. The deal they'd fought about Tuesday afternoon. Johnny, where were you Tuesday night? Atlantic City? I told you? Singing at the 500 Club? I've got 100 witnesses. What time did you leave New York Monday morning? 10 o'clock train. Got to Atlantic City around 3, checked into my hotel, did my first show at 9. I didn't even know Ray was dead until you just told me. His alibi was solid. Another suspect eliminated. Did Raymond tell you he was planning to leave his wife? Or to come clean to Paul about your affair? No, the last time we talked at dinner 2 weeks ago, he said he was thinking about ending things with Paul. That Paul was too demanding, too possessive. That he wanted to be free to live his life the way he wanted. Free to be with you? Johnny laughed bitterly. No, free to be with whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted. Ray didn't believe in commitment, Mr. Goodwin. He believed in passion, spontaneity. Living in the moment. It's what made him brilliant at finding talent. He could spot raw emotion and turn it into something beautiful. But it's also what made him terrible at relationships. I stood up to leave. If you think of anything else, anything that might help, call me at this number. I gave him my card. He took it and looked at it like it was a ticket to somewhere. He didn't want to go. Mr. Goodwin, did Paul kill him? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. I got back to the brownstone at 4 o'clock to find Wolfe in his chair. Eyes closed, fingers interlaced, looking like Buddha contemplating the nature of human stupidity. I gave him my report. Martin Draper's alibi confirmed. Johnny Valentino's alibi confirmed. And the growing certainty that we were missing something obvious. When I finished, Wolfe opened his eyes. Archie. Call Miss Large. Tell her I want everyone. At the office, Dorothy Keene, Martin Draper, James Foley, and her here at my office tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Tomorrow's Sunday? I'm aware of what day it is. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them I believe I know who killed Raymond Heller, and that if they want to hear the truth, they'll be here. Do you know who killed him? I have a theory. Whether it's correct remains to be seen. But I'm reasonably confident that by noon tomorrow, we'll know the truth. What about Paul Larch? Call Kramer. Tell him I'm convening a meeting tomorrow to discuss new evidence in the Heller case. If he wants to be present, and I suspect he should bring Paul Larch with him. Kramer's not going to release a murder suspect just because you ask nicely. Then tell him that if he doesn't, I'll call the press and inform them that. The police have arrested an innocent man while ignoring evidence that points to the real killer. That should motivate him. I made the calls. Vivian agreed immediately, her voice desperate with hope. Dorothy and Martin grumbled, but agreed. James Foley said he'd be there as a professional courtesy, and Kramer swore at me for 5 straight. Minutes before finally agreeing to bring Paul Larch under guard, "This better be good, Goodwin," he said. "If Wolfe's wasting my time, I'm going to arrest him for obstruction. You can try. But you'll need a very big jail cell." He hung up on me. Sunday morning arrived, cold and clear, the rain finally gone, and the sun making New York look almost civilized. By 10:30, I'd set up chairs in the office, the red leather chair, for the most important suspect. 6 others arranged in a semicircle facing Wolfe's desk. Fritz had made coffee, which nobody would drink because they'd all be too nervous. And Wolfe had put on a yellow shirt that made him look like an extremely large canary. At 10 minutes to 11, they started arriving. Dorothy Keene came first, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Martin Draper came next, his bow tie perfectly knotted, his expression nervous. James Foley arrived with his lawyer face firmly in place, revealing nothing. Vivian Larch came last, pale and trembling, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past 4 days. At 11 exactly, Inspector Kramer arrived with Paul Larch in handcuffs and 2 uniformed officers. Paul looked like he'd been through a war and shaven, exhausted, his good suit wrinkled and stained. But his eyes were clear, and when he saw his sister, Something like hope flickered across his face. Kramer had Paul sit in the red leather chair and stationed himself and his officers by the door. "All right, Wolfe. We're here. This better be worth it." Wolfe surveyed the room like a general surveying his troops before battle. Then he picked up his beer glass, drank, set it down with the precision of a man placing a chess piece, and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because 4 days ago, Raymond Heller was murdered in his apartment on Central Park West. The police arrested Mr. Paul Larch for this crime. Based on what appeared to be overwhelming evidence, his gun, his motive, his lack of alibi. But there is a problem with this theory." "What problem?" Kramer demanded. "The problem is that it's too simple, too convenient, too obvious. And in my experience, when something appears obvious, it is usually because someone has worked very hard. To make it appear so, he leaned back. Let me tell you what actually happened Tuesday night. And more importantly, let me tell you why." Everyone leaned forward, even Kramer, despite himself. Raymond Heller, Wolfe continued, was a man of considerable talent and even more considerable appetites. He had a wife, a lover, and at least one affair on the side. He was being blackmailed by Eddie Marsh, a failed songwriter who had photographs proving Raymond's infidelity. He was hemorrhaging money, $500 a month to Eddie, plus whatever he was spending on his young friend Johnny Valentino. And he had just committed to a $20,000 deal that his business partner Mr. Paul Larch had explicitly opposed. Paul's face went white. "How did you—" "I read your note to Raymond. You wrote that you couldn't afford the deal, that your cash reserves were too low, that you were voting no." Raymond wrote back that he'd find the money. Wolfe paused. "The question is, where was he planning to get it?" Silence. "There are only 3 ways to obtain $20,000 quickly when your business account has $12,000. You can borrow it, you can steal it, or you can obtain it from someone who has it and is willing to give it to you." Raymond Heller chose the third option. "Who?" Vivian whispered. Wolfe's eyes moved to Dorothy Keene. "Miss Keene, how long have you been embezzling from Larch and Heller music?" The room exploded. Dorothy jumped to her feet, her face flushed. "That's insane. I never sit down, Miss Keene." Wolfe's voice was cold as January. "You embezzled approximately $8,000 over the past year. It's taking small amounts from various accounts and covering your tracks by manipulating the books. You're quite good at it, good enough that even Miss Larch, an experienced bookkeeper, didn't notice. But Raymond Heller noticed." Dorothy sat down slowly, her hands shaking. "Raymond confronted you Tuesday afternoon, didn't he, after his argument with Paul? He told you he knew about the embezzlement. And he made you an offer, give him $8,000. He wouldn't report you to the police or to Paul. With that $8,000, plus the $12,000 in the business account, he could afford his $20,000 deal. Everyone would be happy. That's not except you couldn't give him $8,000, could you? Because you'd already spent most of it. On your rent, your clothes, your cigarettes, your lifestyle. You didn't have $8,000. You had maybe $2,000 or $3,000. At most, and Raymond told you that wasn't enough. If you couldn't pay him by the end of the week, he'd go to the police." Dorothy's face had gone from flushed to ashen. "He was going to destroy me, so you killed him." Wolfe's voice was matter-of-fact. "Tuesday night you went to his apartment, the one he kept in the city, not his home. You'd been there before, delivering papers, running errands. He trusted you. He let you in. And while his back was turned, you shot him twice with a gun you'd stolen from Paul Larch's desk drawer earlier that day." "No." "Then you ransacked the apartment to make it look like a robbery. You took his wallet. And the next day you called the police and told them where to find the murder weapon back in Paul Larch's desk, where you'd returned it after cleaning it thoroughly. Almost thoroughly. You wore gloves when you shot Raymond, but you forgot to wipe Paul's fingerprints from the gun before you stole it, which meant when you returned it, Paul's prints were still there, making him the perfect suspect." Kramer was staring at Dorothy like she'd grown a second head. "My God. Is this true?" Dorothy sat frozen, her face a mask of terror and calculation. Then slowly she began to laugh. "You're very clever, Mr. Wolfe. Very clever." "How?" But you can't prove any of this. The gun had Paul's fingerprints. The wallet was never found, and I have no motive. You said yourself I'd spent most of the money I embezzled. Why would I kill Raymond over $8,000 I didn't have? 'Cause Wolfe said quietly, it wasn't about the $8,000. It was about the rest of your life. If Raymond had reported you, you'd have gone to prison. Your career would have been over. Your reputation destroyed. You'd spent years building yourself up from nothing. Raymond was going to take it all away over money he didn't even need money. He wanted only because he'd made a foolish business decision that Paul had warned him against. That's not proof, no, but this is. Wolfe gestured to me. Archie. I pulled out a small evidence bag containing a matchbook. I'd found it in Raymond Heller's apartment when I'd visited with Kramer wedged between the sofa cushions. Easy to miss, unless you were looking for it. This matchbook is from the Stork Club, I said. It has Dorothy Keane's fingerprints on it. It was found in Raymond Heller's apartment, the apartment on West 44th Street that he used for his affairs. The apartment that Dorothy Keane claimed she'd never been to. Dorothy's face crumpled. You were there Tuesday night, Wolfe continued relentlessly. You met with Raymond? You demanded the $8,000? You said you didn't have it. It said he'd give you until Friday, but that if you didn't pay, he'd report you, you argued, when he turned his back. You pulled out the gun you'd stolen from Paul's desk that afternoon while everyone was distracted by the argument between Paul and Raymond Dand. You shot him, twice. At close range? Then you staged the robbery, went home, and the next day you called in an anonymous tip directing the police to the murder weapon. Prove it, Dorothy whispered. I don't need to prove it. Inspector Kramer will do that. He'll examine your bank records and find withdrawals that don't match your stated expenses. He'll check your telephone records and find calls to Raymond's private apartment. He'll interview your neighbors and find someone who saw you leave your apartment Tuesday night wearing gloves in April. He'll check the gun for trace evidence, perhaps a fiber from your coat, or a hair, or some microscopic evidence you didn't know you'd left behind. And piece by piece, he'll build a case against you that even the best lawyer in New York won't be able to dismantle. Kramer was already moving. Dorothy Keane, you're under arrest for the murder of Raymond Heller. You have the right to remain. Silent Dorothy didn't wait to hear the rest. She lunged for the door, but one of Kramer's officers caught her before she'd taken 2 steps. She collapsed, sobbing as they handcuffed her. I didn't want to, she gasped. I didn't want to kill him. But he was going to destroy me. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, he was going to take it all away. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. An hour later, the office was empty, except for Wolfe, me, and Paul Larch, who Kramer had released with a gruff apology and a warning not to leave town until the paperwork was processed. Paul sat in the red leather chair, no longer a suspect's seat, just a chair, and looked at Wolfe with the expression of a man who'd been drowning and had just been pulled to shore. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for believing I didn't do it. I didn't believe anything, Wolfe corrected. I examined the evidence and reached the only logical conclusion. Your intelligence made you an unlikely suspect, Miss Keynes. Desperation made her a likely one. The rest was simply a matter of following the money and observing human behavior. She killed Ray because of embezzlement? She killed him because he threatened to expose her. The embezzlement was merely the catalyst. Wolfe poured beer. Human beings, Mr. Larch, are capable of astonishing cruelty when they believe their survival is at stake. Miss Keene convinced herself that murdering Raymond was justified because he was threatening her livelihood. It's a rationalization as old as Cain and Abel, and equally contemptible. Paul stood up slowly, like a man testing whether his legs would still hold him. What happens now? Now you go home. You mourn. You decide whether to continue your business or sell it. You live your life. Wolfe looked at him directly. And perhaps you find someone who loves you without secrets, without shame, without the need to hide in the shadows. Paul's eyes filled with tears. Raymond was a brilliant man with fatal flaws. He was also, if I understand correctly, the love of your life. Those two facts are not contradictory. They're simply human. Wolfe picked up his book. Good day, Mr. Larch. Archie will show you out. I walked Paul to the door. He paused on the stoop, breathing in the cold April air. like it was the first breath he'd taken in days. "Mr. Goodwin?" he said. "Yeah." "How did Wolfe know? About Dorothy, I mean? How did he figure it out?" I thought about all the pieces Wolfe had assembled: the embezzlement, the blackmail, the desperate need for money, the anonymous tip, the fingerprints on the matchbook. I thought about how he'd sat in his chair, drinking beer and reading about food. While his mind worked through the puzzle like a master craftsman building a watch. "He's Nero Wolfe," I said. "It's what he does." Paul nodded and walked away. I went back inside to find Wolfe exactly where I'd left him, reading his book, drinking his beer, looking supremely satisfied with himself. "Nice work," I said. "Adequate work." The truth was always there, waiting to be discovered. Miss Keene simply made the mistake of believing she was cleverer than everyone else. A common error among murderers. What about Eddie Marsh? The blackmail? "Inspector, Kramer will handle that. Mr. Marsh committed no murder, merely extortion. He'll go to prison for a few years and emerge with a new appreciation for honest work." Wolfe turned a page. Or he won't, and he'll return to his previous habits. Either way, it's not our concern. And the money Raymond embezzled from the business to pay Johnny and Eddie? That dies with Raymond. Let the accountants sort it out. I sat at my desk and looked out at West 35th Street, where life was continuing exactly as it had before. People walking, cars honking, the world spinning forward regardless of who lived or died or went to prison for murder. "Wolfe," I said. "Yes. You knew it was Dorothy from the beginning, didn't you?" He closed his book and looked at me with the expression of a teacher regarding a slow but promising student. "Not from the beginning, but from the moment you told me about the anonymous tip. Someone called the police and directed them to the murder weapon. That someone had to know 3 things: that Raymond was dead, that Paul's gun had been used, and where to find it. Dorothy Keene knew all 3 things. Everyone else knew at most 2. You could have told me. Could have. But then you wouldn't have done the legwork necessary to confirm my suspicions. You wouldn't have found the matchbook or verified the alibis or interviewed Johnny Valentino. When without that evidence, Dorothy would have walked free and Paul. Larch would have gone to prison." He picked up his beer. "Sometimes, Archie, the best way to teach is to let the student discover the truth himself." Very philosophical. Very practical. He drank. "Now leave me alone. Ritz is making brook trout for dinner, and I need to prepare myself mentally for the experience." I left him there reading about French gastronomy and drinking German beer. A man who'd solved a murder without leaving his chair, and who'd probably already forgotten the names of everyone involved, except he hadn't. Wolfe never forgets. He just pretends to, because caring too much about human tragedy would interfere with his orchids. His meals, and his carefully constructed world where everything happens on schedule and nothing is permitted to disturb his peace. It's a nice world if you can afford it. Most of us can't, but for one afternoon in April, watching Nero Wolfe explain how a desperate woman had killed her employer over money and pride, almost wished I could almost the end.